I was in the process of buying this 1.47 acres on Green Road in a town called Spring Hope, North Carolina. I thought it was the perfect manufactured home site. And I was getting a great deal on it because I was buying it at $13,000 and I thought I could actually sell it on the open market for about 35,000. That is assuming that the property had suitable soil to install a septic system. But the issue came up when we got the soil report back because the soil report came back bad. The entire property was unsuitable for not just conventional septic systems, but you couldn't even install an alternative septic system like an aerobic drip or a mound system because those types of systems in North Carolina require 12 inches of usable soil below the surface. So even if you bring in fill material, that wastewater drains downhill. And so you have to have certain drainage in the native soil on the property, which we don't have here, which means that for the standpoint of single family residential, you can't build. And there's no timeline where this property would get sewer service extended to it. So the home site that we thought we had is in fact a nice 1.4 acre property that'll never have a home. And the idea of paying $13,000 plus closing costs for that, no way. That land won't work. It doesn't perk. And if I bought that land for 13 grand, I'd never get my money out. The only way that I could ever sell that land is if I bought it for a song, a price so low that I could afford to sell it for next to nothing and still make a little bit of money in the process. That's what I told the seller, by the way. And I told the seller that based on the bad soil report, and the fact that it was a contingency on our purchase offer, and plus the fact that if I bought it, I'd be paying all the closing costs, plus eating the cost of the bad soil map, that the best that I can do on that property is $750. Maybe a neighbor wants to buy it, build a utility shed or a detached garage. Otherwise, I'm going to be holding the bag on this thing for a couple of years and breaking even some point down the road. And yeah, you heard me correctly because we were under contract at 13,000 and I asked the seller to meet me at $750. You know what the seller said? His response? He was like, any way you can do 1,000? And what I said was no. And then his response was, okay, that's fine. Let's do it. And the next thing he said was, it's funny. I never could get that land to perk. The seller knew. And he wasn't surprised when I renegotiated. He was just holding his breath and playing dumb until I got the soil map that I'm sure others had gotten before me. So I went on and I bought it at $750 plus closing costs. And all told, I was into the property at about $2,000 or a little bit more with the title search, the soil report, and everything. I ended up selling it at $8,000 on the open market. I guess the guy wanted to have like a detached garage or like for his boat. He wanted to park a boat out there, which is about all the land was really good for. And so I made a little bit of money there, not much. But what's interesting is that we're talking about a piece of land that we knew was worth $35,000 with a single septic permit. And yet, instead, it sold for just $8,000 because it didn't have it. That is nearly an 80% price drop on the same land due to a single issue that is completely invisible on the surface of the property. And that's what this video is all about. Because what we're going to cover in this video is the relationship between soil quality and residential land value. We're going to talk about how alternative septic systems and unsuitable soil hurt land values and what the difference is between the two. We're going to talk about how to overturn denied septic permits with the county, how to use soil maps to determine the subdivide potential for a piece of property, and how to work with soil scientists to get septic approved where it would not be possible to do that otherwise. Sometimes a property has soil that's good for septic, but it's not the kind of septic that you want. It's the expensive kind. The kind of septic that costs more to install and lowers the value of the land that you're buying as a result. Reminds me, of this property in Cumberland County, North Carolina. It's a 7.4 acre tract of land that we were buying at $62,000. We were thinking at the time that we could sell it at about 110 grand on the open market. Obviously, there's some cost and there's some risk taking in the middle. You never know, but I felt pretty okay about it. This is in a community called Eastover Air Ranch in Eastover, North Carolina. Nice subdivision, nice like town east of Fayetteville. And there's actually, it's funny, in this subdivision, there's like a little airstrip. Not a lot of people use it, but they call it Eastover Air Ranch because it's like an airstrip HOA. It's kind of like a cool community, nice homes, higher income area, higher income subdivision. But I like the part that the lot we're buying was not actually in the HOA. There was like some scandal and hearsay from back in the day about how they were supposed to annex it, but they like forgot to get the signature of the previous property owner that owned that 7.4 acres. And it was always a headache for the HOA because they were so reasonable. They were so cool. The fees were not much. It's like a nice community. I talked to the HOA president. He was like, it's like a bummer because you guys, that property benefits from the road maintenance on the main road that property fronts out to on Final Approach Drive. And so really you guys are benefiting from the road maintenance of the HOA. And like, we can't make you join the HOA. And that was like when my ears perked up. I was like, okay, it's like, yeah, look, we're in the process of selling it. All right. So let's just wait and see. And the next owner is going to want to build a home and then you're going to talk to them. He's like, that sounds like a great plan to me. But we're in the process of doing our research as we always are. And in 2021, what we found was that there was a denied septic permit from the county that somebody had paid. I guess the previous owner had paid to get a septic permit through the county office, and they denied it. They denied it due to expansive clay mineralogy and unsuitable soil wetness. Can't put a septic. Can't build a home. And so what the seller did was he got a second opinion from a soil engineer, basically a soil scientist that works for an engineering firm. And the soil scientist has some additional credentials through the state to be able to manage septic permitting, either in part or in whole. And a private soil scientist in some cases can actually walk you through the permitting process and you don't have to go through the county office. Or if you do, it's like a checkpoint. But they don't have to be involved the whole way. It's more expensive and easier to do. Like way better experience for the landowner. But the point is that, yeah, the soil engineer that the previous owner had hired, they looked at it, they were like, look, you can put a mound system. And the system that the soil engineer previously identified was about $50,000 plus. So all of this is coming through our research. And so I hired a soil engineer of my own to get a second or third opinion, I should say. And the third opinion, this soil guy called Walter, who's based out of Wilmington, the Wilmington area, he drove up there and he's like, hey, good news. You can put an aerobic drip system for a 4-bedroom home. And it's not a $50,000 system. It's more going to be like $35,000, which I guess is good news. And I knew that this guy could put his money where his mouth was because he could actually do the permitting and the design and the layout. And so, although it's not a $50,000 system, it's only $35,000. Remember, that is compared to an $8,000 conventional system. So compared to the majority of the septic permits, the septic systems that you would install, there is at least a $27,000 cost differential. But the value impact is actually greater than that because the land value is not merely reduced by the $27,000 hard cost of the aerobic drip system. There's also a premium that you have to bear because the buyers in the market are going to be a little bit skittish. There's going to be some running costs and maintenance costs of the more expensive systems, generally speaking, that you would not find for a gravel-based or a chamber conventional septic. And so really the actual impact is probably more like 30, 35, 40 grand. And so I successfully renegotiated with the seller who had agreed to sell to us at 62,000 down to 29,000. And guys, the reason that I was able to do this is because in the purchase agreement that I was using, one of the conditions was confirmation of suitable soils for a conventional septic system. And so it makes it a whole heck of a lot easier to renegotiate when you're like, hey, Purchase agreement, line 7, subsection 7A, when I said this, yeah, we don't have that. So when you can point to that, it gives you a lot more leverage and it makes you look more credible and professional. So we were able to get 33 grand off the purchase price. And I thought that instead of selling for 110,000, it was still maybe worth 75. But the capital partner that was working with us that was going to fund that deal, that they go in on some of the properties we buy, they fund it, and then we have like a deal where we split the profit on the back end. The funder pulled out. And she was like, "Yeah, I don't like the drip system." But I was like, "Yeah, but 29 grand." And she's like, So I just bought it myself. I just paid for it because I just thought it was really nice. I thought it was so nice. In fact, yeah, there's like 500 grand plus custom homes like right next door, like newish construction, just nice neighborhood, nice neighborhood. I always ask the soil scientists for a second opinion when they go to visit property because they spend all day outside. They know these areas, they know the roads. So I always ask them like, well, what'd you think about the property? What was the ambiance of the neighborhood? What was the charm of the property? What'd you feel when you're out there? These are the questions I ask them. And Walter was like, he's like, look, actually, when I got out to the neighborhood, it was nice. He's like, in fact, it was so nice that when I was in the woods doing my soil samples on the front of the property, I was bracing and I was concerned that like a neighbor was going to spot me back there and yell at me for being back there in the woods. Not that the neighborhood was too nice for him, but just the neighborhood was nice enough that he felt the need to justify his presence and his activity. And that was like a really good sign for me. Because even though the aerobic septic system would be a curveball for a lot of buyers, and certainly it was when we brought it to market, you got to remember that the land was nice and the neighborhood home values were high enough that the kind of sophisticated buyer that's going to get a construction loan to build a custom home here is going to be able to absorb the additional cost of the septic system in their home build because the actual value of the finished construction is going to be able to accommodate a slightly more expensive septic system. So we bought that land for 29,000. And then after closing costs and everything, we're into it at about 30,790. It took a while to sell. It took 8 months to sell. And it sold for less than we thought. Sold at 63,500. After commissions, the net sale price that we walked away with was 57,428.50. And then the total gross profit was 26,638.50. The lesson here is that as a buyer, when your due diligence uncovers hidden costs, added costs that there's no way that you could have found without research or without a site visit, someone's going to pay for it. But if that person isn't the seller, that person is going to be you. But it doesn't make sense that you pay for it because the cost that we're talking about is intrinsic to the land itself. And so because it's a hard cost that increases the cost of construction for that property, it directly lowers the value of the land as a result. So the seller eats that cost. And it's not because I say so, it's because the market does. And this is what you tell the seller, because what you explain to them is that buyers are going to see this. And now that we're here and we found this out, you have to disclose this. It's a material adverse finding. And so they can't hide it. Buyers can't hide from it. And it's going to be a line item in construction, and buyers are going to negotiate you on it, as they should, because it directly lowers the value of the land. And that's the whole point here, guys, because evaluating the differential cost of construction between two similar properties, two similar tracts of land, identifying the hidden costs on one property versus the other that can have a direct impact on the value of one piece of land versus the other is a major determining factor of land value. And it's a big part of knowing what land is actually worth. This is a topic that we cover extensively in the Land Purchase Navigator, which is the online education product that we've developed that distills over 5 years, over 10,000 hours of experience flipping hundreds of tracts of land across the United States, generating over $2.5 million of gross profit on vacant land into one self-guided 5-hour course. I'm the instructor. You learn all the systems, all the playbooks, everything that you need to know to buy land like a pro with no prior experience required whatsoever. Limited time only, discounted pricing is available on our website today. Terms and conditions may change in the future. Right now, get the discount while you can and check it out on our website at acrewell.com or in the link in the description below. Sometimes with septic, it's so specific, and a property, the site plan for septic is so special, and the actual usable soil for septic is so limited that you have to protect it at all costs. Reminds me of this 1.98 acre property on Santec Road. This is in a nice area of Chatham County, North Carolina, just west of Raleigh. With a single 3-bedroom septic system, with confidence and local market sales data to show, we believe that the land could sell for $45,000. But without it, the land might be worth $10,000 to a neighbor, maybe. When you look at the water features and you expose the terrain and water features on the land portal, you learn a little bit more about this property, because what you see is that along the eastern boundary line of the property, you have a creek. But with that creek is going to come a 50-foot plus riparian buffer. What that means is that within 50 feet of a blue line creek, a regulated waterway such as the one that we had here, you can't put a building foundation, you can't build anything, you can't have a septic drain field. So that pushes us away from the eastern side of the property to the west. Now, when you look at the contours on the western side of this land, what you find is that in the southwest corner, you have the high and dry soil. There's a reason that high and dry go together when you're talking about land, especially for construction, especially for septic, because land that is higher ground is generally going to be drier as a result, because water runs downhill, not just above ground, but even below ground water runs downhill as well. And so when you have the higher ground on the southwest corner of the property, you have credible evidence that that may be a location for a septic system. And by the way, if you're interested in these maps and you want to step your game up in terms of data, if you want to save a ton of time, if you want to save thousands and thousands of dollars when you're buying land, if you want to save a ton of hassle and heartache when buying land, I'm going to give you a free trial link to the land portal software. Use it for free for a week, see if you like it. And you're going to get the QR code and the link in the description below with an exclusive offer to try the software that we use every day in our business. But before sending the septic permit application on this one to the county, we actually got not one, but two soil evaluations. Because the initial soil evaluation was from a guy that we work with for years, whose name is Larry. And what Larry confirmed is what the land portal soil topography maps indicated, which is that in that southwest corner on his soil map, he marked an area called PS as provisionally suitable. That's good. That's what you want. But he also found a marginal area along the western-ish side of the property, southwestern, towards a little bit closer towards the front. But he also marked the riparian buffer as floodplain, even though technically it wasn't a FEMA mapped flood area. I think he just saw something in the soils. Soil scientists can see, I think it's called hydric soil. They can see soil that's frequently flooded. I think he saw something there. But the point was we had enough area in the provisionally suitable area for a chamber system. But the marginal area was exactly that. It was marginal. And when you get a septic permit approved, generally speaking, you don't just need an area for the initial septic system. You need also a separate designated piece of dirt on the property for what is called the repair, which is exactly what it sounds like. If the initial system breaks, you have an area of soil that's been earmarked for a rainy day, no pun intended, that you can install another system, and they permit both of them up front. Even if the repair gets installed 26 years down the line, the soil was evaluated. So the initial system could squeeze into the PS area, but did we have enough for the repair? So this is where we got a second opinion from a soil scientist that followed Larry to that site. And the advantage of the second soil scientist was that he knew exactly where to go because Larry flagged it. Larry flagged the areas of good soil that he sampled and the areas of bad soil. A little bit of trivia. Larry counterintuitively marks the good soil with red flags and the bad soil with blue flags. And the reason why is that red is NC State and blue is Chapel Hill. So look, his words, not mine. I'm just passing the information along here. The point is that the second soil scientist was following the red flags in the PS area and the marginal area. And what he found was, yes, you do have a septic and repair for a 3-bedroom chamber system in these two locations. Great. So the second soil scientist we sent out there because we knew that he could pull permits for us if we wanted to use that service. And ordinarily I would, because this is a property that the soil is very limiting and highly specific, highly specific. But a lot of county offices, they're like kind of like hostile to taxpayers, where it's like, there's like in some county offices, like if you want to pull permits to improve property to like stimulate the economy and improve the tax base, they like are hostile towards you. But Chatham County, North Carolina is fortunately not one of those locations. And this is an environmental health office. Just talking to those guys, I could tell that they're pretty hardy. It's a county with a lot of tricky soils, but good property values, a lot of development. And so they're accustomed to getting into tight spaces with septic permits and like they'll work with you. Plus, if you work with the county office versus a soil scientist, you can save $1,000, $1,500, $2,000. And that's what we did here because that county office is pretty good to work with. I trusted that based on Larry's flags and Gary's report, that they could get into where they needed to and pull a permit for us, which they did. They pulled a permit for a 3-bedroom chamber system and repair. And then we sold the property for the $45,000 that we thought it was worth. But something happened a year later. We weren't the owners of the property anymore. We weren't the owners of that land anymore. But we did get an email from the site inspector that actually went out the year before, the guy that got us the permit that we asked for. And the reason that he emailed me was because my email was attached to the paperwork for the septic. And what he told me was, during a site visit, I'm going to quote this guy, during a site visit, however, I saw that the site was logged during winter when the soil was wet and that all stumps were pulled and piled on top of the 2 drain field areas. The soil was severely damaged during this operation. I see that logs are staged, presumably for being taken to a mill. I would rather not use that portion of the drain field area that was used as a skidder / bulldozer / logging road. This lot already had a very limited area of soil that was suitable for a subsurface septic drain field. The lot also has no other options for a repair area when the initial system eventually fails. If we cut out the severely damaged area from the total drain field area, this is all a quote, folks, of a carefully worded email. It may no longer be possible to install the pump to at-grade low-profile chambers on a pressure manifold type of septic system that is specified in the improvement permit. If this turns out to be the case, I will have no other options available to me that I could use to write the permit for a different type of system that takes up less space, and I will need to revoke the septic permit. Basically, there was a disturbance to the site, to the soil. The logging company who cut the timber at the behest of the new owner effed up the soil, may have even ruined enough of it to render the property permanently unbuildable, even though the 3-bedroom permit had been issued the year before. It wasn't worth the paper that it's printed on. Not if the soil had been damaged in between, because after you get the improvement permit for septic, you have to get a construction authorization. There's a second layer of permitting before you build. I've gotten so many comments. This is one of like the nerve centers of where I get comments, where I get all the comment, not all, but I get a lot of comments over the years from people who don't understand what I am about to tell you. What I'm about to tell you is that when soil gets compacted by heavy equipment during wet weather, the soil loses its critical ability to drain water. And the compaction of the soil, it happens at a microscopic level that is just very hard to reverse. If possible at all, it's extremely expensive. When you have limited area for septic, you must be extremely careful not to disturb that area. Because if the timber company destroyed the drain field, as the environmental health inspector implied, then it's possible that the new owner of this property who bought it from us lost $35,000 of property value, plus the possibility of ever having a future home at that location in exchange for an amount of timber worth $1,500, $2,000, maybe. I am here to tell you, I am here to evangelize the reality that this happens all the time. This just happens. It happened here. Ask around. If you're in the East Coast of the US, ask around. Soil scientists will tell you about this stuff. And I will too. So don't let it happen. You know, sometimes the soil quality on a particular property is directly going to enhance the value of the land by creating potential for a minor subdivide. The ability that you have on a property with sufficient road frontage to split a larger property into 2, 4, even sometimes up to 6 smaller building lots. This is a tract of land, 10.7 acres on a street called Lassane Road in Bladen County, North Carolina. Great farmland, a nice old rural home site. It's actually got an old home from the early 1900s that's overgrown behind a thicket of trees. We got the land at a really good price and we knew that it was worth more than we paid. But how much? How much more? What would it sell for? Because this is a 10-acre tract of land where the comps that were similar property that sold nearby were selling for $60,000 to $65,000. And that's what the broker that was buying that or that was helping us list that property told us too. It was like, look, you know, I think it's probably going to sell for about 60 grand. But the thing is, guys, I knew that they were wrong. I knew he was wrong. Because when I got the soil map, I could see that this 10-acre tract could easily be subdivided into 4 separate 2.5-acre building lots. I could see it. I could tell. And I could further tell that each of those 4 building lots could easily sell for $25,000 to $30,000. It's perfect for a manufactured home. You have the zoning, you have the location, you have the price points, a high quality property, and you could still have most of the farmland in service. You could just put homes up front. It would barely disturb any of the farmland. You could do a minor split, keep the farmer happy, you know, have some affordable housing in that location that needs it. And by doing that, if the property has 4 building lots that could sell for 25 to 30 grand, just do the math. It's not a $60,000 property. Note that we did not have to actually subdivide the land. I did not subdivide this land. You don't have to subdivide the land to realize the value of a subdivide. What I mean by that is that you just have to prove that the land can be subdivided. And if you can do that, then you have the value right there, because any buyer that is worth their salt can see that based on the soil map, based on a basic interpretation of the zoning, you can see to what extent you can subdivide that property. And that's what I could see too. Which brings me to the soil report. And in print journalism, in newspapers, there's this old saying called burying the lead. You ever hear about that? Burying the lead. It refers to an ineffective writing style that conceals the most important part of a news story, of an article, by not mentioning it in the headline or the intro paragraph. And the lead is the thing. It's why you write the story. And yet the reason you write the story is concealed by the person that chooses to write it. It makes no sense. And so no one buries the lead more than soil scientists, folks. No one buries the lead more than soil scientists. Not that I've seen. They hide the headline report, the headline findings of the $1,000 soil map that you pay them to produce underneath technical jargon and misleading narrative that even some geologists probably don't understand, let alone any layperson or agent or buyer that would be on the other side of that report. They conceal their findings in guarded language. They think for liability reasons, but that's not actually the case because they already have all the disclaimers and limitations in the report. It's a preliminary report. It's not a septic permit, subject to review, do not pass go, don't collect $200. We get it. But they just bury the headline because it makes them feel safe. Even though it borders and sometimes crosses over into inaccurate reporting. Because the actual conclusions of the soil map that they draw are not reflected in the written report that everybody reads, okay? For example, the soil scientist who wrote the report on the Lassane Road property bolded the section on unsuitable soil areas. Unsuitable. They're in the middle of the report. Unsuitable, bolded, underlined. And they were like, quote, given the severity of these soil and landscape position limitations within these areas, the soils would typically not qualify for use. That was the section of the report that was emphasized, bold, underlined, italics. And the average person, including myself, that's where your eyes, it's like, okay, this must be the important thing. And you're like, oh no, unsuitable, what? So the average person would just go to that section of the report and be like, yeah, I guess it's unsuitable. Like, oh, better luck next time, right? Well, wrong. Because when you look at the map on the soil report, you see the legend in the corner and the cross-hatched area indicated on the map that is denoting the provisionally suitable soils. These are all the good soils. These are the good soil locations. You could put septic in anywhere on those locations. That's like 70% of the property. It's 7 acres. And when you look at the land portal, that is basically the entire cleared cropland on the property, which is the bulk of the property, plus the woodlands behind the two main sections of cropland on either side of the pond, which you also have on this property, by the way, as well. So this is welcome to my life. I bring this up to the soil scientist. This is one of the first times I work with him. And it was like really jarring and just, it made no sense. I was like, wait. But like most of the property is good for septic. So why are you bolding this thing in the middle about how it's unsuitable? And he did the song and dance about compliance and liability. It's BS. It's not real. So the soil scientists, like, give me a like, give me a comment if you're a soil scientist. You know I'm right. I can't wait to get the comments. Guys, if you could see how much money I've spent over the years on soil reports, you would know that I have credibility to say what I'm saying here. And this is why the many hundreds of thousands, I'm gonna say the hundreds. I would say many. I would say multiple hundreds. How's that? How about 200,000? At least that I've spent on soil reports. I've learned to just ask the soil scientists to revise the report, and I know like what they should say. So I did that here too. I was like, hey, can you add a set thing at the top that like gives the headline for people that are like going to be looking at this that want to buy the land, to tell them that like, yeah, 70% of the land, it's like good news. It's like really good. Okay. Can we just say that? And he ended up, he had like some compromise, some like negotiated edit at the top where he was like saying basically that the land could support at least three 3-bedroom septic systems for 3 separate homes. He refused to put it in bold. It was just an act of protest, I guess, even though that was the summary finding and the whole reason that we paid him to do the thing. It wouldn't do the thing. That's okay. This thing was like, well, I'm not really sure what zoning would allow. I'm not a zoning professional. I don't want to, it's like, I don't want to put something in there and then it turns out it's like, okay, but just write that then. Just be like, hey, I'm not a zoning professional, without any disclaimer on like permitted use, based only on the soil conditions and soil conditions alone. You have septic and repair for, 6 or more 3-bedroom homes subject to verification. Will never happen. They'll never do it. They won't do it. So I stopped working with this guy as a result. Guys, like, why am I doing a 10-minute spot on this? Why do you think I'm doing a 10-minute spot on this? Because when you sell your land, buyers look at these reports. Why do you think that I care so much about cosmetic edits? I already know what the report says. It's not for me. It's for everybody else. It's for the listing agent who's going to sell it so that they can believe that they're supported in making accurate and more generous claims. For the buyer, for the buyer's agent, so they can have confidence in writing the offer. Guys, these cosmetic edits on the top of these reports can be tens of thousands of dollars for free. I'm just here to tell you that that's the case because I've seen it. And I'm just trying to reflect the facts. I'm not trying to like turn water into wine. I'm just trying to like shine a light on the water that's there. So, and by the way, on this property, you don't have 3 septic and repair areas. You have 25 or more. You have 25 or more mutually exclusive septic and repair locations on this property. It's clear. It's not like, if the map's correct, he's basically discounting the map by 90%. Okay. Now, zoning's not going to allow 25 homes here unless you do a major subdivide, but you don't have the economics, the utilities to really do that here. So a minor split, you have the road frontage for 4-ish home sites comfortably. And for that reason, I knew the comps were wrong. I knew the broker was wrong. I knew the land was worth more than 60 grand. And guess what? I was right. I told him to list it at 95,000. And a few days later, we had an offer at 87,500. And it closed a few weeks after that. And ironically, one of the person that bought it was one of the extended family members of the grandfather, the family that actually owned the land that sold to us. And so we sold it back to like one of the great nieces or something, or one of the in-laws. So it stayed in the family, and it all worked out as a result. And by the way, if you want to learn about the process that we use to buy this land, the actual step-by-step process we use to buy land, we call it the land purchase roadmap. And there's a free link in the description below. Anybody can download that. And if you download that, you can see exactly the 6 steps that you need to follow to actually buy land successfully. And then all the requirements in each of those steps that you need to do to advance from one step to the next. And so when you're struggling in the process of acquiring property, if you don't know where to start, or you've started, but you kind of feel stuck, you're going to be stuck in a specific part of the land purchase roadmap. And so you can see exactly where you are stuck. And so you can get unstuck by identifying and localizing the issue so that you can solve it. So check that out in the link in the description below. Or not. Either way, it's fine. We have fun around here, don't we? So just because a certain property has good soil and can be subdivided as a result, doesn't actually mean that the subdivide potential of the land is actually going to enhance the value. It did on Lassane Road, but it doesn't always. Take a look at this 10 acres on Old Macon Highway in Warren County, North Carolina. Bought this land at what I thought was a really good price. Spotless soil map, which was really good news. And this property has tons of road frontage too. I mean, it could easily be split into 4 2.5 acre lots, just like Lassane Road, even though it's a very different property. And each of those 2.5 acre lots could sell for 25,000, I thought. We'd sold land in this county before. We'd sold a bunch of property in this county before. So, we kind of had some muscle memory around these price points. So I'm thinking 4 times 25,000 is 100,000 resale value on the split, maybe 75, 80 grand when you take out some of the survey costs, some of the holding costs, some of the administrative costs of actually doing that subdivide, but you got 75, 80. But I read the market wrong, because the property here was on an old stretch of road. It's an unpaved rural highway. The land was timbered a couple years back, and so it was cut over. It grew up real thick. It wasn't easy to walk around in. There was really no curb appeal as a result. It was a very tired area, not a lot of new construction, not a lot of people buying land to build a home, to build a manufactured home. And the land that was selling was higher acreage, 5 acres or more. So if we wanted to sell 2.5 acre lots here, I'm realizing that $25,000 was not going to induce a buyer to buy a property that small at this location. In fact, I'd probably have to be at about 15 grand, which means that instead of 100,000 potential resale value is more like 60, but that 60 would be selling that property into a softer market because it would take me years to sell through that subdivide, and I'd have to find 4 buyers instead of 1. And every one of those buyers would be harder to find because they're not looking for property that small at that location. Plus, I'd have to pay thousands of dollars and manage the survey project and the subdivide and all this type of stuff. So the land's acreage was the only real selling point, ironically, even though we thought we had a lot more going for us. And the split, the minor subdivide, removes the one selling point that we had. So I ended up selling that land out in one piece. I sold it at $44,000. And after closing costs, we barely made any money. Unlike Lisane Road, Old Macon Highway was not real pretty. It was not a real pretty piece of property. And the sum of the parts was not any greater than the whole. And whenever you look at a potential minor subdivide scenario, the question that you have to ask yourself is the market actually going to compensate you for the minor split? Are you going to be compensated by the market? Is the sum of the parts greater than the value of the whole? Just because a piece of land can be subdivided doesn't mean that it should be. On the other hand, though, we had a great 11-acre tract of land in a lakefront HOA property. The HOA was lakefront. The property was not, but it was really, really good. I don't normally buy HOA land, but I bought this one because it was a good one. And home values here were 500 grand and up. And this property, like, we had a broker price opinion from a guy that I trusted. And with land, it's an art as much as a science. I don't blame him at all because I agreed with him. Because we saw that there was like some comps above 100 grand for like 10, 12 acre property around the way. So we listed at 11 acres at 120, like 29 or something to start, then at 120, 115, then down to 99. Nothing, no bites. But when we try to get creative, what I realized was that the soil map that we had gotten done on this property enabled us to split that land into 2 separate building lots. And each of those 2 separate building lots went on to be split up and then sold separately. The smaller lot to the west, the 4.48 acre lot, sold at $47,000. And the larger lot that was 6.6 acres to the east sold at $52,000. So we sold the land at $99,000 in total when we never would have sold it that high without doing the 2-lot minor subdivide. But not only did the market compensate us in terms of price for the value of the minor split, but we're also able to sell that land faster than would have been the case otherwise. If you like this video, you're going to like the next one even more. It's called The New Map That Makes Land Buying Easy, and it's all about the most powerful mapping system available online today and how you can use that map to make the land buying process as easy as possible. There's going to be a link here, and I hope you liked the video, and I hope you like and subscribe and enjoy the content on the channel as well.